Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, try. Yeah, I can hear you,
I
Bobby.
can hear everybody. I hear you now, Rob. You went out. Talk for 20 minutes. Oh, now
It's all
you're gone.
right. Really?
It
I'm
says
right.
you are muted by the host. You are unmuted by the host.
Oh, okay, Jim, can you not mute us for a second? And now it looks like Jim is muted. Yeah, Jim, you're muted. Okay. Okay. So why don't you play Cherokee and we'll get started, and then I'll give you a sign and you can fade it. Okay. All right, I guess we're live, Bobby. Got some questions for you.
Let's see how far we get down the list.
I'm good. I can hear it. Hey there, welcome to Live Jazz KC and uh, another installment of Convo Improvo, where we're doing some live interviews with some world-class jazz musicians, some of whom are based right here in Kansas City. And our guest tonight, is the esteemed Mr. Bobby Watson, alto saxophonist, composer, arranger, professor emeritus, co-leader of the band Horizon. Hi, Bobby. Good evening.
Good evening, Rob. Good to see you.
Back at you, man. So Bobby was saying, I wonder how far we're going to get tonight, because a week ago tonight we were on this show and we were talking to Bobby, and I think we talked about his life for an hour and we got just past college. So so to fill people in, where we kind of left off, Bobby had gone to University of Miami. He had gotten turned on to playing standards here in town with some help from Pat Metheny. And he had met Jaco Pastorius and Mark Egan and Melton Mustafa and all kinds of folks in Miami. And then we had kind of started in Bobby being in New York and playing with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. And Bobby, I think you had been talking about just kind of playing around New York, hitting every session that you could, sitting in with great cats when there was somewhere to do that. What are some clubs and some players that you would sit in with when you first got to New York?
I sat in with, I got a chance to sit in with Rasan Roland Kirk. I got a chance to sit in with Albert Daly and
Mm-hmm.
his trio. I sat in with, I got a chance to sit with Woody Shaw, and got a chance to sit in with George Adams.
Beautiful.
Just, Curtis Fuller and them cats,
Uh-huh.
Jimmy Forrest, Chris
No
Wood,
kidding. Yeah.
Rich
Okay.
Miles.
So basically there were opportunities to play with incredible people. It wasn't like you had to kind of claw your way up the ladder to meet these folks, right?
Well, no, I was very nice and cordial. Get to meet him. I would come and hear the band
Mm-hmm.
for 2 or 3 days, and during that time, I would
Right.
get to meet them and hang out with them and look at them with Bambi eyes and show them a lot of respect. And
Sure.
they took a liking to me, and so after I listened to the material, uh, maybe about the third day, because usually you could sit in on a Sunday. That's the last set.
Oh, at the Vanguard, among other places.
Yeah, they let certain people sit in on the last set on a Sunday. So I mean, you didn't want to sit in on a Friday or a Saturday or opening night,
Mm-hmm.
or even a second night. You would have to have a certain decorum and
Right.
etiquette.
So that's to your advantage because some people go to New York and they just kind of want to slay it and take it by storm, and New York doesn't care, and New York might let you do that, but it'll probably knock you on your ass. So it sounds like you figured out early on how to act to kind of get into some of these scenes.
Well, yeah, this common courtesy, I thought.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you mentioned about going to hear the band 2 or 3 nights, if I can just say this without sounding too pedantic for younger musicians, when you're kind of only thinking about you sitting in and getting on the guest list, that's in no way as good an approach as what you did, Bobby. Because if you went and you paid to cover and you heard the band on a night where you weren't even trying to sit in, it's kind of like, paying your respects before you're even attempting to get a chance to play. And I know that always goes over well with older cats.
Yes, I mean they want to see. And afterwards, you come up and introduce yourself and
Mm-hmm.
and listen to what they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause a lot of people that are older, they like to share.
Mm-hmm.
I found that most of the older folks I met were happy to share and eager to share stories, and they
Mm-hmm.
just needed a good ear, you know. And
Right.
I'm a good listener, and so I was fair game for them guys. I was perfect game, perfect victim.
I see. In the crosshairs.
That was all right. That was a great
Yeah.
crosshairs to be in.
Right. Well, can we jump back to Art for a minute? So we had talked about you playing with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, and you were very visible, man. You were a visible composer, and as a matter of fact, so was your wife after a point when you were playing some of her tunes, right? Like Miss BC.
Mm-hmm.
And so you stayed with Art Blakey longer than a lot of folks. I mean, maybe Lee Morgan or Wayne Shorter were there for 4 years, but most people are not, and you were, correct?
Yes.
Right. And as we said last week, that wonderful quote that you had, Art Blakey saying, "This is not the post office," implying, little bird, you're growing up, time to fly and time to leave my band and do your own thing and go on to other things, correct?
Yes, he wanted to give as many young folks a chance before he had to hang up his sticks.
Yes. And so can you remind us again, who was actually in the Messengers when you first joined?
Valerie Ponomaroff, David Schnitter, Dennis Irwin,
Mm-hmm.
and Walter Davis Jr.
Okay, so it was a sextet, and you were not replacing an alto player, correct? Was it just a quintet before you came in?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and if you look at the history of Art's bands, there are quintets like Lee Morgan and John Gilmore, or just Lee Morgan and Wayne Shorter. but it seems like those quintets became sextets when the appropriate players showed up. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a quintet record with Bill Hartman and Jackie McLean.
Mm-hmm.
There's several quintet recordings of Jazz Messenger recordings. In fact,
Yeah, I think there's Woody Shaw with Carlos Garnett, and there's some other quintet configurations. And sometimes near the end at Sweet Basil or at the Regatta Bar in Boston, I would go to see the band, and there were four horns. It would be trumpet, alto, tenor, and bone, which from a standpoint as an arranger is, that's a holiday, being able to write for that.
yeah, I mean, the original Jazz Messenger was a quintet,
You mean the way back Kenny Dorham and Hank Mobley?
Right. That was a co-op band. That's why you have that record,
Right.
Silver in the Jazz Messengers. It was whoever got the gig. It could be sometimes it was Kenny Dorham in the Jazz Messengers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it was
All
like
right.
whoever got the gig, they
Okay.
were. But it turned out that Art was getting more of the gigs, and one day he just declared that he was taking it over. And
I see.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, now, Bobby, like your first night or your first week on the bandstand, what club and what city, and how did you learn the music before you worked on the first night?
I listened to the records and I added parts,
Mm-hmm.
to the quintet records. I added a third part, and then the sextet records.
Okay.
I just I took the trombone parts and made them. I memorized all of them, and when I stepped on the bandstand, it was an instant sextet.
Right. And let's assume, I mean, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I would bet that there was no rehearsal, that your first time with the band was your first gig. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was no rehearsal.
Okay, did anybody give you any clues as to what repertoire was currently being played? I mean, things that Art always did, like Blues March, or maybe something more current written by Valerie or Schnitter or someone?
They weren't writing.
They weren't. Okay.
No, I was in the band. David was in the band before me. He hadn't written anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was basically we were playing Walter Davis tunes,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of Kamal tunes, and the standard fare, and then ballad features. And I'd seen the band several times, so I knew the format.
Okay.
And I knew what they were going to play or not play.
Uh-huh.
And so if anything that they played that I didn't know, I just wouldn't play on it.
Well, that's very interesting, because look at it this way. If you were Billy Pierce replacing Dave Schnitter, you would have tenor parts to learn on a lot of these songs, right? I mean, certain harmonies, certain parts. And certainly if you were Wynton coming in after Valerie, you would have to learn those melodies. So you, interestingly, nobody ever said anything, but you had to kind of craft your own alto book in a way.
Yeah, I did.
Uh-huh.
I created my own book.
Interesting. And I don't remember, but when you did leave, was there an alto player after you? Was it Branford, perhaps?
It was Branford. Mm-hmm.
And did he basically then have to learn your parts in a way?
Yes.
Okay, so because you had solidified some things in the arrangements, and I know what a wonderful arranger you are, so I'm sure that whatever you chose was working well. So Branford came in and had to learn the Bobby Watson parts.
Yeah, Art had him on the gig with me for a couple of weeks, shadowing.
Yes.
And he had said that he wanted to expand to four parts, the four horns up front, and would I write a part for Branford? I said, well, nobody wrote a part for me. I'm not going to write a part for him. But he knew my parts, because by that time everything we were playing had been recorded. So Album of the Year was out there, and Keystone Corner records and the Timeless records. So all that stuff was documented. So all he had to do was cop my parts from the record. And Branford has a fantastic ear, and I think he has a photographic memory as well.
I see. Well, that always helps in that situation. Well, Bobby, let's put it this way. Some messengers go through the band and make a mark only as a player, and other cats really make a mark as a player and as a composer, like Benny Golson, like Lee Morgan, like Wayne Shorter. And like yourself, to me, the Messengers repertoire changed partially because of your wonderful compositions. What were the first ones that you brought in that Art performed?
Time Will Tell, and a song called Hawkman.
Mm-hmm.
Then I brought in another song called Pamela that he recorded,
Mm-hmm.
and then James was there too. So James Williams was bringing in stuff. So me and
Right.
James were doing the writing.
Did you know that when you and I recorded in Kansas City in March, right before the lockdown, that the day before you came in, we recorded one of James's compositions?
Yeah, what was it, Mr. Timmons?
Alter Ego.
Yeah, oh yeah, Alter Ego.
Yeah, that was actually chosen by Ron Carlson. I was not hip to that song when he brought it in.
Yeah, we played that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then actually,
well, not the Messengers.
Well, a question. See, you played with Walter Davis on piano and then with James Williams. Did you have any overlap with Donald Brown in the Messengers?
Yeah, we did some gigs with Donald Brown. There's a video of the Toronto Jazz Festival in 80 or early 81 with Donald Brown and Wallace Roney on trumpet.
Oh yeah, rest in peace, Wallace Roney. Well, the question is, Donald is a wonderful writer too. Did his tunes become part of the repertoire while he was in the band?
Yes, but I was after I was gone.
Right. Well, so I have a question for you.
Played my stuff for a while.
Okay. Well, I know that Thad Jones occasionally would say, I mean, Jerry Dodgen told us that Thad said, pick up your pen, Dodge. And Jerry goes, what are you talking about? Thad goes, I want you to write for the band. And Jerry goes, I can't do that. And Thad says, yes, you can. And then Jerry wrote, thank you. And then he started having his charts played. But Thad had to ask him. I guess my question is, did Art ever tell or ask anyone in the band to write? Or did what get played, was that just a result of who was writing and had the impetus to bring in their music?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the records, you know, Wayne wrote, Curtis Fuller wrote, Cedar wrote, Freddie wrote. You know, so when you join the band, it sort of was expected of you to try to put something in there. Benny Golson, I mean, Lee Morgan, I mean, that's part of the tradition of the Jazz Messengers.
Well, so without any disparagement, what do you think was the deal with Valerie and Schnitter not writing? Do you think that they didn't have a lot of tunes, or maybe weren't confident about their compositions, or what might have been going on?
Everybody's not a composer, Rob.
I hear you, Bobby. Yeah. Well, you certainly are. And can I ask you something? When you started writing, not just arranging other folks' music, but writing your own tunes, who were some of your influences in terms of style when you were composing?
Wayne Shorter.
Of course.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Duke. You know, Horace Silver. Train. I mean, Herbie
Hancock, like Speak Like a Child and things like this. And
yeah, his writing was very influential.
Sure.
And Lee Morgan wrote great tunes.
He did.
And I just listened a lot, you know, and I studied a lot of formally composition, so I was able to learn and start to use certain tools of the craft, as they call it, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I learned something about Wayne. I mean, look, you and I and anyone who knows Wayne's music knows that he's written hundreds of great tunes. I mean, he's not just great, he's prolific, and every song works. I've never heard a mediocre Wayne Shorter composition.
Well, I'm sure there's some in the drawer.
In the piano bench. But, you know, but do you remember when he did the kind of funk orchestra record, High Life, in the 90s? Yeah.
I love that record.
I love that record too, and that record kind of got some bad reviews, and I thought, well, that's just silly. This is a great record. But, you know, I remember thinking, well, Wayne wrote the orchestrations with oboe and French horn and all these strings, and I think I was sitting with Danilo Perez, who was kind of a schoolmate of mine in Boston, at a Wayne gig, and I knew Danilo. I did not know John Patitucci, and Patitucci joined us, and I think I asked that. I said, you know, when and how did Wayne learn to write for an orchestra? And John said, oh man, he learned that back at NYU. He learned that in college. It's just he had all those years of Wayne Shorter playing in small groups and maybe not getting to show or write that way. But I guess he had that ability all along, and I'm sure that you do too.
It'd be great to have opportunity. I did a little bit of writing with Bob. Oh, he just passed away.
Not Bob Friedman.
Yes, me and Bob
Really?
Friedman worked together.
Okay.
On several projects,
Okay.
long distance. You know.
Is he the fellow who was writing charts for Ron Carter's big band over the last 10 or 15 years?
Yes, and he also did Hot House Flowers and some other records.
I see. Oh, a Wyndham's record. Okay.
Yeah, and even before then, he was doing great things.
Well, I've never actually heard about you collaborating with other writers. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Well, he was arranging stuff for me.
Ah.
He was expanding it to the orchestra, so I learned a lot of stuff from him.
Mm-hmm.
It would take me a while to put something together for orchestra.
Right.
It'd be trial and error. I wrote what I could, and he put the strings and the other stuff on it. We had we had a great partnership because I had heard him do something with Wheel Within a Wheel, or one of those tunes I wrote,
Mm-hmm.
that with a Swiss orchestra.
Yes.
And I said, man, I like what he's doing. He's not really changing, and he's enhancing.
Right.
He's putting everything in addition to it. He's not taking anything away and
right.
replacing it. He's expanding what I've done. And so I was able to get in touch with him, and we hit it off, man. And you know, he was living out there in Arizona. I think he moved back to New York right before he passed away.
Okay.
You know, and we never met face to face.
Oh, really?
And we didn't have FaceTime there. We just talked on the phone and emailed every day.
Okay.
Know?
Well, so aside from collaboration, would you say that most of the tunes that you think are good that you wrote in your first 5-7 years of writing were for somewhere between a quartet and a sextet almost exclusively?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I was writing big band stuff as well, because I was with my motivation for writing, I like to get it heard.
Sure.
That's like, I think a big motivation is for writing for an ensemble that you have access to. So I was always wrote for the ensemble that I was with, and I was with a sax quartet for 14 years. So I wrote a lot of sax quartet music.
Of course.
And then when I was with Charlie Persip Big Band, and John Hicks had a small big band, I wrote for that ensemble. And did a big band arrangement of In Case You Missed It for Charlie Persip.
Okay. I think I remember that record possibly.
You know, I write what I like to write. I can't write unless I know I'm going to hear it played.
Right. And of course, at the age that you are at right now, you were writing before we had Finale and Sibelius and an opportunity to hear the whole piece at home before you took it in, right?
Yeah, that was always a very anxious moment when you
yes.
out and you raise your arm and you're going down.
Yeah, and there's certain things.
And you want to change some certain things.
Right.
So you have to really be ambitious to want to change or add. You know, you couldn't just cut and paste, you know. So it kind of made me, the machine actually liberated me, because I still write by hand and my stuff still comes. But once I put it into the machine, if I want to open it up, I use less repeats.
Oh, okay.
Instead of repeating a section, I'll just cut and paste it again, another 16 bars, instead of having to save paper and, you know, first, second, third, fourth ending, and, you know, play first time through, and you got all kind of nomenclature, you know.
So you feel that now you can simplify the roadmap and get a more accurate performance out of cats a little earlier.
Right, and sometimes, you know, it uses more paper. Maybe
Yeah.
you got a chart that's 4 pages long, whereas before you make it maybe 2 or 3. If you had 3 pages, you know,
Uh-huh.
you had to have repeats, and there was a more of a roadmap.
Well, in terms of the philosophy of that, I remember when I would write a chart and there would only be 2 or 4 bars left at the bottom of the page, and you'd have this desire to cram them in and be all neat and clean. And then somebody told me once, if you have to write page 2 with 2 bars on it, the rule is don't cram,
I get it.
you
I mean,
know?
paper, man. You know, you had to buy the paper, you
Sure.
know, and you had to copy it. You know, and
Yeah.
we had people who would do copy work. You know, a lot of people,
Right.
calligraphists. You
Well,
know, they would make,
uh-huh.
you know, big money copying for Broadway and
Sure.
TV shows and by hand. You know, and I did some copy work myself. You know, because I
Hmm.
had a nice hand.
Yep.
You had to have a pen, a certain pen, and your stamps. You
Yeah,
know,
with the nibs and
you
everything.
remember
And,
you got the little stamp, 10 or
uh-huh.
1. Then you stamp the title, and you know, it was all manual. It was great. I mean,
Okay.
and then Pam would help me copy parts from the score. We set up the table. We would say, hey, we're opening the music factory today. So
Uh-huh.
Pam would be copying you copy the trumpets, I'll copy the trombones, and then we would do it together
Sure.
to copy. And now it's like knowing how to drive a stick shift and being able to appreciate an automatic transmission, and then beyond that, being able to appreciate cruise control.
Hmm.
So, and a manual and power steering as opposed to manual, uh, automatic windows as opposed to the whole thing. The cars and everything we did was more hands-on, more tactile.
Yes.
And so as these improvements came on, they were really I can utilize them and appreciate them more because I have many, many years of writing stuff by hand and having to make the parts even,
Yes.
the bars, and format them, you
Hmm.
know, and using
I,
my pencils. I have a big eraser.
oh yeah.
Really important. I had a really nice, in fact, I got a nice one coming tomorrow.
Well,
Electric
that's
eraser.
nice because I mean, in a way, we are both dinosaurs because I asked somebody when I got to Kansas City, where can I get some whiteout? And they laughed in my face. I found it, and I've been using it on some scores, but this some of the tools we like are a little obsolete in the marketplace.
It's hard to find whiteout.
Yeah. Well, so Bobby, let me throw something at you if I might. Can I list about maybe 5 or 7 of your compositions, and you could give a kind of short reaction, like what the title means and anything associated with the tune that you might want to say?
Sure. I just want to say to people though that if you're writing a song or you're trying to compose, the last thing that you think about is the title. The title will reveal itself to you. And a lot of my titles have came from other people. So the
Okay.
title is like writing an introduction to a song. If you're going to compose, you don't start out trying to write an introduction. The introduction will come from somewhere within the composition. So
Okay.
title with introduction, those are last. But when a title hits me, it does fit the tune, and so it's not random, Robert. I just want to make sure you know about that.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so question is, one of my favorite Bobby Watson tunes is "In Case You Missed It." Am I wrong, or was that tune also called "Fuller Love"?
Correct. It was
And
written
which
for
was first?
Fuller Love. It was
Okay.
written for Curtis Fuller.
Ah.
Fuller Love.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's full of love. He brought me to Art Blakey, and he took me under his wing, and we're still friends and family to this day. His wife used to babysit Lafia, and they lived right down the street from us after a while. And Curtis, he's on that record too, actually, on that
Which,
song,
which record is that?
All Because of You on Roulette.
Okay.
That's
Roulette,
what
the
Roulette.
label of Count Basie and Joey D and the Starlighters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the quick question is, why did you change the title to "In Case You Missed It"? And do you ever use the title "Fuller Love" anymore?
No.
Okay.
The whole title is it's in case you missed it, and it's dedicated to my uh, former publisher. And I changed the title. So the title is that I changed the title. I changed the name of this song from Full of Love,
Mm-hmm.
in case you missed it. So if they want to come after me, I was in the tradition of Cedar Walton, with Ugetsu,
And it was also called Fantasy in D, was it not?
Polar AC on a Freddie Hubbard record.
Oh, was that another title for Ugetsu? Polar AC? I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, on Columbia. So I mean, Cedar changed the title several times, and nobody came after him because we're not talking big bucks. I'm not like Bruce Springsteen money or.
But this is a way of protecting your publishing and your royalties.
I just changed it. I still get some pennies from Full of Love.
Uh-huh.
I still get some money from Full of Love, but I also get money from In Case You Missed It. But nobody and it's my responsibility, But I figure that if the old publisher wants to come after me and take me to court, then there must be some money involved.
Right.
And if there's money involved, where's mine?
Yes. Well, I love In Case You Missed It, and I first
put out of it, man. I saw that thing y'all did down at the Majestic, man. You guys tore that sucker up.
Well, thank you. And you know what, man? I hadn't gotten a whole lot of chances to play it before that, but it had been in my head for 20 years, so it was getting ready. That was a gig where it was Mark Lowry's quartet, and he was nice enough to hire me, and I think he had Ben Leiper and Elliot Zygmunt was in town. He was
Elliot Zygmunt, yeah.
Right. So In Case You Missed It, I heard it on Art Blakey Album of the Year when I was in Oslo, Norway, and I said, "Oh man, I love that tune. I got to get that." I didn't even know you then.
Yeah.
Not quite. Okay, let me throw some other tunes at you a little more concisely, because most of the other ones have just one title, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Country Cornflakes. It's kind of a great title, man.
I wrote that tune. The melody is, I wanted something that was preachy, like when my uncles preached. My grandfather was a preacher, and now my nephew is taking over. But they get this cadence, I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna try to find I'm kind of so it's like a preacher. And so, I'm looking for a title, and Curtis Lundy said, "Man, that sounds like Country Cornflakes." And so I said, "Yeah, it does."
All right.
Because I'm country. I'm Country Cornflakes.
Beautiful. So so that tune, that title, and that feeling is sort of, it's like a sly, hip look at corniness in a way.
Well, I don't want to say corny, Bob, but
maybe the wrong word, but how about there's just a little, well, there's a country flavor to it. It's not just like slick bebop or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's Midwestern.
Okay. So you think it has some flavor from that Midwestern flavor?
It's
okay.
Midwestern church. It's the church, Midwestern.
What do you think of this? I had read recently, this never occurred to me, a book about John Coltrane where they were saying that perhaps some of the cry in his sound came from his dad and his grandfather being preachers in North Carolina, and some of that cadence and that sound that he was hearing growing up.
But yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I grew up in the church, so
I see.
I've heard. I've always been really very particular about singers. I've heard great singers that just make you cry.
I'm sure.
They just live in the church.
Well, look who came out of the church: Sam Cooke, Aretha Franklin. Incredible singers. Starting there. And Miss Betty Wright just passed away. The way she sings, I don't know, but I bet she came out of the church.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, Lemoncello, Bobby.
All right. That was written on my horn. I was actually had a tenor that I was carrying around for a couple years, as well as the alto and soprano.
Mm-hmm.
the airlines would let you do that.
Right.
And so I had a couple of days off, and I was in there, and I was just messing around with the tenor and came up with the bass line, you know, and uh, because the melody, go so it sounded like Looney Tunes.
Aha.
Like when the merry-go-round, yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You like that? So I'm
Uh-huh.
like, my title was, uh, uh, what do I call it? What's up, Doc, or something, you know?
Okay.
And so then uh, I was in Italy and playing it. It was really catchy. So the lady says, you should write a, you should write a song about limoncello because we love the limoncello.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I'll just call this limoncello because I think that there's a record on Red Records with that song, and it's a whole different form even
Mm-hmm.
with Kenny Barron and Jerry Bergonzi and myself. I think Curtis and Victor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's got a different title.
Right. Well, okay, and let's stop this section with this one. This is probably, I would guess, one of your best known songs, "Wheel Within a Wheel." Would that be correct? M-
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe one of the most often recorded by other artists and by yourself and by Art Blakey.
Yes. I mean, I wrote that when I was with Art, and I took it into the band without a title, and
Hmm.
Art said it sounds like a wheel within a wheel.
I remember you mentioned that last week, and it's such a perfect title for that music. Visually, it evokes. You say, "Yep, that's the title." So it's interesting that it came from Art. So I guess it takes a certain creativity and openness to occasionally get your songs titled by other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more organic, symbiotic, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes I come up with the titles myself, but I'm not I don't take a megalomaniac approach
Yes, you mean
to.
not too much ego.
No, I mean, because I mean, look, there's a bass part and the piano. You need the piano. I mean, you need everything, and then at the end of the day, you get to put your name up in the right hand corner.
Right.
But that's the final privilege,
Uh
and
huh.
copyright it, and hopefully get some royalties from it. But it's if you kind of gotta like bounce it off of humanity. I like to bounce my songs off of people and situations and play it for people and just let it go where it's going, you know.
So in other words, once you've written it in a way, it's almost not yours anymore to a degree.
Technically, yeah. I mean, like Art Blakey put the beat to Time Will Tell. I'd
Hmm.
heard it as an Elvinish type tune, and he put that dun 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 dang. So
Hmm.
I let him interpret it. We just
Sure.
recorded a new record
Uh huh.
that's coming out in June, June 26th. It's called "Keeping It Real" on Smoke Sessions,
Okay.
and there's a song on there called "My Song," and I originally had been playing it up tempo, and Curtis suggested to go take it slower, and I was like, oh man, I didn't really want to, I mean, it's like, for
Hmm.
instance, like, let's see how, let me do this. I was up there.
Uh-huh.
And Curtis says, let's take it down.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I had to really open up and let go. I said, okay, let's try it.
You had to let it happen, I guess.
I didn't want to.
Yes.
At first I said, oh, come on, Curtis, man. No. He goes, no, let's try it. I said,
Oh.
okay. Because I've been with him for 40 years. It was sort of like one of those little darling moments. No.
When you change the tempo drastically and somebody says that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Bobby, I think we're going to play Wheel Within a Wheel right now for the folks out there. And our sound man is a wonderful drummer here in Kansas City. Thank you. That's Jim Lauer doing sound for us tonight. And our producer is Herschel McWilliams. And what we're going to hear, Bobby, I don't know if you and I will be able to hear it. Hopefully all the listeners will. And this is going to be Wheel Within a Wheel from a live performance with a quintet with Jack Walrath and Orrin Evans. Do you remember this? It's live.
It's from YouTube, huh?
It is.
Okay.
You're wearing like a pumpkin or mustard colored suit, I would say. With some bad threads. Okay, well anyway, let's play one of Bobby's greatest compositions, which you may recognize if you're any kind of jazz fan, Wheel Within a Wheel. We're gonna hear some of this.
Yeah,
okay, Jim. What's that?
Hey, what kind of jazz fan are you, folks?
Yeah, that's right. If you don't know Wheel Within a Wheel. Should be coming up. Is it playing?
I'm going to real.
I think they can't hear us talk right now. This is they were going to play the head and then Jack solos and then you solo and then we'll fade it down at the top of the piano solo.
Okay, you can hear it.
I can't, but we talked about it while you were gone, and that's what we're going to play. Or maybe he's having a problem. I'm not sure. I hope he just left the screen. We'll see. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's talk. Yeah, congratulations, man. Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl for 50 years, but they won it this year.
That's why my balloons. They'll stay up until they fall down.
Yeah, well, you know the most rabid Chiefs fan of all the musicians in Kansas City, I think, strangely, is Candace Evans. There's nobody more into the Chiefs than her. And I said to her on Facebook a couple weeks ago, what are you going to do now? The Chiefs won the Super Bowl. She goes, wait for them to win the next one.
That's right. I know some pretty rabid ones. I know some pretty rabid ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Kansas City fans, man, are the best.
Sure. Well, she's deep into it. Well, in case people are hearing us talk and they're not hearing the music, how about the 29th Street Saxophone Quartet? How did that group form? Who put it together?
Ed Jackson. I see our engineer doing something.
He's doing something. Did you know that Ed was my teacher at camp when I was 13? Oh.
spell.
Oh yeah, I saw Wason.
We're back.
Okay, I guess we're back. We couldn't hear it, but we hope you guys heard it and enjoyed it. That was Wheel Within a Wheel by Bobby Watson. And was that, would you say Bobby Watson Quintet, or was that a version of Horizon with Victor?
That was probably quintet.
Yeah. Well, it's a great piece of music, and it's obviously one that works for lots of different ensembles. I've heard your version of it with the 29th Street Saxophone Quartet, with Ed Jackson and Rich Rothenberg, who sold me my first car, as we know, and Jim Hartog. And the interesting thing about that is I went to New England Conservatory. I was younger than those guys, but I know that Ed Jackson was there before me, and so was Jim Hartog. So they must have known each other at that point. How did y'all decide to put together a creative, rhythmic for fellas?
Well, they'd already, Rich and Jim and Ed had already started the quartet, and we're auditioning, looking for another person. And they approached me at one of Saul Fromkin's annual Christmas parties.
And Saul Fromkin, for the folks who don't know, is a legendary saxophone repairman in New York City.
Yes, he worked on Bird's Horn and everybody's.
I didn't know that. No kidding.
Yeah. And so they approached me and said, "Hey, man, we're starting the sax quartet, man. Would you like to come by and, check us out and rehearse?" And so I did. And, besides, I dug where they were coming from. And I mean, they didn't have much music. It had some things he had written while he was in school, and he wanted a sax quartet that was, rhythmically active, rock, could rock the house, and get down funky and sustain. We did all types of feelings, tempos and genres, and so again, I started writing for it.
For that band. Were there any doubles in that band? Any soprano or flutes or clarinets, or just straight up 2 altos, 1 tenor, 1 baritone?
Hell no. We traveled light.
1 horn each.
Yeah. That's right. That was enough. And a big ass suitcase.
Gotcha.
Our suitcase was full, because sometimes they'd be full of records. We had records, and we sold all of our records. We used to sell like 80 records a night.
That's incredible. 80.
100. We used to ship them to different ports of call. We shipped a couple hundred to the UK. We shipped a couple hundred to Germany, some down to Italy. So when we were down there touring, our tours used to last over a month.
That's incredible.
Big tours, Beautiful. And so it was we couldn't bring enough records with us, so we would ship them ahead of time, and we would sell records like hotcakes.
That's fantastic.
So we used to play in Central Park for a long time.
You mean at the beginning?
Yeah, we go out and play in Central Park and work our material out and play. Put a tip,
And of course, you'd make a bunch of money doing that on a nice day, playing that music. It was
all right. Yeah. Sometimes I remember one time we unknowingly within somebody else's spot, because.
Oh yeah, people. I used to do that. People get very territorial in New York, whether it's on the street or in the subway, for playing spots.
Yeah, they got their spot, at their time, So you have to respect that, So, but other than
you work around it, or you move 4 blocks away, or you do what you got to do, right?
We just moved a little way, and then just, we moved 10 feet down and then play and just mess their stuff up too,
Well, let me recommend this to the listeners out there. Among the many different things that Bobby has done, 29th Street Saxophone Quartet, which was really more of a cooperative than any kind of Bobby Watson ensemble, correct?
That's right.
It's a wonderful band. It's killing. I never got to hear you guys live, but I had some of the vinyl records that I got later. And I'd like to recommend that band. And if you like the record enough, Bobby can send 100 to your town.
Oh, we still have some.
I bet.
We have plenty of vinyl.
Beautiful.
Plus it's on YouTube. You can find footage of us on YouTube.
29th Street Sax Quartet.
Yeah,
Well,
we got a lot of footage.
Bobby, I'm going to change gears. So you said something interesting before. I mean, you like singers that came out of the church, but what I noticed was you said something like, "I'm very picky. I only like really good singers." Is that a fair statement that you have a high standard for the singers you prefer to play with?
I have singers that move me, and
Yeah.
basically that's the first criteria, that their voice, the voice gets in you, and you're like, whoa,
Hmm.
the voice, uh, and then it's always good if they uh, know some music too,
Sure.
some.
Well, I looked at your discography to find out about the records you made that I didn't know about, and I discovered that you've recorded with just a beginning, 4 really great singers. Can I throw their names out and maybe you could talk about playing with them? So, firstly, wonderful singer who's based in Denver, Diane Reeves.
Yes, well, that was a project. I did projects with these singers. I never really worked with them,
Do you
and
mean that you were writing arrangements for them?
mm-hmm.
Okay.
They would give me the rhythm parts, like
Hmm.
not Bob James, the guy that did all the arrangements for CTI.
Oh boy,
Tedeschi,
Don
John
Sebesky.
Tedeschi.
Okay.
So that formula was like, and they did all those records with like Wes Montgomery, where you got strings and everything, and Freddie Hubbard, First Light, and Red Clay, et cetera.
Hubert Law's Rite of Spring, George Benson, Joe Farrell.
Yeah, so they record the rhythm first,
Hmm.
and Freddie and they record it as a quintet or a quartet, and then they give Don Sebesky the that part, and he writes around it and fills it out
Okay.
with underpinnings and different things, and builds around the record. If he hears the piano do something, he
Okay.
he might anticipate it in the strings, so it sounds like the pianist is hearing the strings, or he might do something in the piano and it sounds like the strings are answering the piano.
Yes.
So that one, At Last, that was Lou Rawls and Diane Reeves was on that record both. So
Hmm.
I did arrangements for that record, and
Well, I got a couple more for you. Well, I know you must have been close throughout your adult life to the Lundy family, and I know that you worked with Carmen Lundy.
oh yeah, we did a lot of gigs. We had a band in Miami called
Okay.
called Nimbus. You know,
Uh-huh.
I put up a picture on Facebook a couple weeks ago of us in Florida. I had a fro about like this.
Oh yeah.
I just came back from the barber, so
Hmm.
it was like a hedge. It was very smooth.
Okay.
Uh, we had a band called Nimbus, me and Curtis and Carmen and some other cats.
Uh-huh.
And so when Carmen did her record, I think it's called Good Morning Kiss
Hmm.
first record she did. And again, she had already sang and the rhythm section was there. So I got the tracks and then I built the arrangements of those tracks. And we went in, I think
Okay.
John Status was on that date, Steve Turre, and we went in and recorded over the tracks. And then we left a little room. They had left the room for solos because Carmen had already planned that I want a blueprint.
Okay.
The same with Joe Williams, that Christmas record he did.
Right. So I didn't realize, Bobby. I saw that you had played with all these folks, but you were involved in writing on most of these dates too. It
yeah,
seems.
I was called in as an arranger.
Okay. So but you did play alto and solo also on each of these records with Diane and with Carmen and everybody.
Yes,
Okay.
that
And
was
so you wrote a Christmas record for Joe Williams, huh?
yeah. The rhythm section done.
Huh.
Yeah. Richard Winans, I think, was on piano.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great rhythm section, and Joe had already sang. So I took these. They gave them to me at the beginning of the summer. Michael Cascuna, you
Right.
know, and so I had the tracks. I took them on the road, and I wrote I scored the horns. So when I got back to New York, we had like Joe Newman, Clark Terry, uh, Joe Wilder, uh, uh,
Great band. Al Gray.
Al Gray, yeah, Frank
Yeah.
West.
I
Like
worked
that.
with Al for a couple of years, and I tended to see some of those guys around him. You would see Clark Terry around Al, or Steve Turre and other trombone players around Al. Al had his weird things, but one thing he wasn't weird about is he loved other trombone players. So
Yeah,
that, you know, I remember being in the studio with him. We were either with George Cables or Norman Simmons on piano, but I remember Turre came in and Dennis Wilson, and of course his son Mike, and so there were a ton of trombones around, you know, on the scene. Well, what about Miss BC, which is the title of the song that your wife Pamela wrote, correct? That Art Blakey recorded.
right.
Um, so, but you worked with Betty Carter. Was this also a writing project, or were you added to her working trio in some way?
I never worked with Betty.
You didn't. Okay.
No, we're friends, you know.
Uh huh.
We knew each other, and I knew her through Curtis
Hmm.
and Art. But I did a big band arrangement of that. She commissioned me to do a big band arrangement of Miss BC.
Okay. Well, the
Yeah.
question is, when Pamela wrote it, was it played first as an instrumental before it ever found its way to Betty?
Yes.
And did someone write lyrics to it for Betty, or did she scat on it?
I think she scattered on it because
Nobody's scatting like that except for Ella.
you know.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Hmm.
what he does. You know, Pam, really into Betty. We used to follow the band around. We used to go see them a lot, you know.
Beautiful. Well, I have a surprise for you. The last singer situation. Um, One of the greatest arrangers in jazz post Gil Evans is the late Bob Belden. I bought one of his records recently, and then there you were. It was the music of Sting. This particular record,
Oh yeah.
and Belden was an archivist who would always write these incredible liner notes on all the Miles Davis and Gil Evans and Wayne Shorter reissues. He knew every, Wayne Shorter did this at 4:13 p.m. and he knew every little detail. But Belden made these, I don't know what you would call them, but he made a record of all Prince music for his jazz big band. There's another great record of Tapestry where he redoes all the Carole King songs, and then this record, uh, I can't, Straight to My Heart, which is Bob Belden Ensemble with incredible guests playing the music of Sting. And
Yeah.
I guess you got called in to solo on Sister Moon. Do you remember
Yeah,
that session?
Moon. Yeah, I do.
And who was the singer on that particular song?
Oh,
Could have been Phil Perry.
yeah. Phil.
Yeah, Phil Perry.
Yeah, Phil Perry.
Yes, he's an amazing singer.
That was
Great
Phil
singer.
Perry. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, me and Bob talked every day. We met through Ray Mantia,
Oh, okay.
on a tour with Ray Mantia over in
Uh-huh.
Italy. And Bob was the other horn player the first time I met him. And we got together. We just got together, and Bob was he he's so deep,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, he really understood the music, and he went deeper into the history than a lot of folks. And I just personally, I think his writing is some of the greatest writing of the last 30 years. And not to tell tales out of school, but our friend Brad Gregory here was a classmate of his at North Texas State. And the word on the street is that Belden could basically sit in his room watching Gilligan's Island while smoking something and write incredible, incredible charts with no piano and no saxophone. This
Yeah,
is, the process about, like, some of the great writers like Billy Byers, cats who can actually write for a big band without using a piano. That's kind of amazing, isn't it?
yeah. Bob was incredible. I mean, he knew so much about a lot of things.
Hmm.
I mean, he knew a lot about. He's from South Carolina.
That's right, from Charleston, wasn't he?
Charleston, yeah. So he was a Southern boy,
Hmm.
and we had all kind of things cooking. He went to Iran.
Really?
Did a tour
For
in
what? For
Iran.
work? You were performing there?
He did a whole tour in Iran. I
Wow.
got all kind of pictures he sent me from Iran.
Hmm.
Beautiful, and they played the packed houses in beautiful theaters, and it was the people loved it. They was packed, and he went to Iran and was there for like 2 weeks or something, and took a lot of video and sent me pictures and because he was just saying, Bobby, you got to go to Iran, man.
Huh.
Because it's like it's just incredible. That was
Huh.
about a year and a half before he passed.
Yeah. Well, Bob Belden, beautiful writing, and like your writing, Bobby. Also, I mean, I have the deepest respect for your writing. I feel.
He did an arrangement of mine. He did an arrangement of Country Cornflakes on one of his records.
Was that for his large ensemble for the big band, basically?
Yeah, it was like
Interesting.
Different kind of instrumentation.
Well, speaking quickly of you writing for big band, there is a YouTube that's easy for folks to find. You have a wonderful chart of Wheel Within a Wheel for the Art Blakey Big Band in Japan. Is that correct?
That was like 3 brass and 3 reeds.
Kind of like an expanded Art Blakey Messengers, like not quite a full big band, but it had that vibe and that sound.
Well, I'm using the whole concept like he did with on Golden Boy.
Golden Boy is a record most people will never find. I have it on vinyl on the Colpix label, which is the same label that Bobby Boris Pickett originally recorded the Monster Mash on. So you won't find it, but I found a copy of Golden Boy somewhere for $20 and I've got it. Wow. And that was Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, but with Charles Davis on baritone saxophone, Julius Watkins on French horn, color additions in the music that were not normally there.
And he had Freddie and Lee on there.
Yeah, and there was a record Soulfinger.
I forget Barber. There was a tuba player on there.
I think it was Bill Barber who was on the original Birth of the Cool and Miles Ahead. That's right.
It's a great record. Great.
Yeah,
record.
well, I like that.
Most rearranging.
I'm sorry, who did?
Wayne
Shorter did. Well, I mean, man, it's kind of like when the Bulls had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, or when the Mets had Tom Seaver, followed by Jerry Kuzman and John Matlack. How are you going to beat an Art Blakey band for writing that has Cedar, Freddie, Wayne, and Curtis in it?
Yeah.
Those are 4 excellent writers with different styles, and I'm sure that you could have done many, many Art Blakey records just playing Wayne's tunes or Lee's tunes. There was a lot of output, probably the inspiration, and somebody recently said this, I forgot who, but they said, it was Bob Mincer in an interview online with Brett Premack last week, where Bob said, when I was playing with a band like Buddy Rich and I was playing 6-7 nights a week, it became easier to write for big band because the sound was in my head all the time.
That's right.
So when you were playing with Charlie Persip's super band, did you get to play enough to kind of have the sound of the band in your head more than usual?
Yeah. And I've been writing for big bands since I was in high school.
I see. Okay.
So I'd always heard that. I don't use doubles too much. It depends, it depends.
Well, you know what? Everybody has their sound palette as a writer. Thad Jones uses lead soprano all the time. Other people don't. The Count Basie band doesn't really use clarinets. You got Eric Dixon playing a little bit of flute.
Yeah, a little flute and Basie, clarinet for days, and Duke.
Yeah, Buddy Rich, for the last 30 years of Buddy's life, no clarinets at all. But so if what you hear is like not a whole lot of flute and clarinet, Bobby, then that's what you're going to write, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Or if you're somewhere in a town where you have excellent players who don't do a lot of doubling on other woodwinds, you might have to write around that fact.
Well, see, if I had you in the band, I would certainly write for flute.
Well, I appreciate that, and you told us last week when we were talking about your earlier days as a student and as a young man, you said you were playing clarinet first and then tenor, and you were playing those instruments well and enjoying them, and then you said that you were doing a lot of the shows in Miami because unlike some other cats on the Miami scene, you were doubling.
That's right. I worked a lot because I could double.
Sure.
That's something that my younger colleagues on woodwinds would really do that. You could because the union used to get paid extra for doubling.
Sure, right. And on Broadway, I used to sub on Broadway, not a whole lot, but of course you wanted every double you could get because every double was extra bread. you know, and the best thing in the world is when you would get a book that was like saxophone, flute, clarinet, piccolo, and there'd be like a page of clarinet, and that was it.
That was
But
it.
but you get that double. Well, speaking of this, Bobby, there's something I'd really like to talk about. One of your special projects. I mean, I imagine you'll agree, but for Kansas City listeners, they might be more familiar with this piece. Bobby, tell us about the Gates Barbecue Suite and the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra and the band from your college, from UMKC, that you recorded the piece with.
Um, yeah, I
Gates Barbecue Suite.
I wrote it during my sabbatical. I've
Mm-hmm.
been working on it for years, and Mr. Gates Mr. Gates is a big supporter of mine.
Is that Ollie Gates, the
Yeah,
original guy?
Gates, and he's a big jazz fan. He used to have a jazz club. His dad played saxophone, and so he's a jazz man. And I told him, I said, I'm gonna write a suite for you. I'm gonna write a Gates Barbecue Suite. And every year, couple of years, he goes, where's my piece? Where's my piece? I said, I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Okay.
I finally got it done, and I've rehearsed the hell out of the band at school, and that probably was my best band I ever had while I was at UMKC.
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, when I heard that record, I wasn't sure if it was the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra. And then I found out, no, man, these are students. Unbelievable.
Yeah, those were students. A lot of them some of them are playing with the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra now, but
Uh-huh. Who were some of the students that we would know on the Kansas City scene who were in that band and on that record?
Ryan Lee,
Uh-huh.
Ben Leifer, Will Crane, Herman Mahari, Ryan Sharp, lead trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Lambert, Will Saunders.
Mm-hmm. So you did that's something that I was going to bring up after this.
Michael Schultz.
Oh yeah, great alto players in Memphis now.
That band was stacked.
So I mean, that's the kind of thing. What we were going to get to is that Bobby has had this incredible career as an educator, where you essentially moved back from New York to your hometown to Kansas City to lead jazz things at the University of Missouri, UMKC as we call it, and you've been there for the last 20 years, and you just retired around the time of this quarantine. Is that correct?
Yeah, last week was my official last day.
Congratulations, Robert.
Official last day of teaching. Commencement was last Saturday.
Did you have to wear a square hat?
No, I was a commencement speaker for the conservatory. I was honored to be asked, and
sure.
And I went up to campus and recorded it a couple weeks before, and the whole thing was a virtual graduation.
Yes.
But so I didn't have to. I think I put on a jacket, for the recording. But yeah, I had some great students like that band, like the Gates Barbecue Band. We could do anything. We went to Japan with that band. We could do everything. Anything. We could play anything. That was the zenith.
I hear you. Well, so the question being, how did you come to get this? I mean, it's kind of a plum job in a way. You have a nice regular salary and you're teaching jazz, and you're also in your hometown, which happens to be a great city to live in and to play jazz in. What made you really go the full mile to leave New York and come back to Kansas City to teach at UMKC?
I've been in New York 20 years, and I was very fortunate to get a lot of opportunities. And I think I reached a certain profile where I didn't have to live in New York. I didn't expect to move back to Kansas City. And honestly, when I was thinking about taking the job, and when I got thinking about throwing my hat in the ring, at least, I felt a little bit guilty.
Guilty why?
Like I was abandoning ship, I was a traitor, going AWOL from the war, because we were all in the trenches, hardcore jazz musician, leave New York for a cushy teaching job. You know what I mean?
But then again, there's financial security. There's the desire maybe to live somewhere where you're not always up in traffic and not having a car and not having a yard and all of that.
Well, yeah, I'm from here. I mean, this is perfect. I mean, it was just ordained,
I mean, you got to go home when you took this job, correct?
Yeah, I'm going home. My parents and Pam's parents and
Hmm.
my uncles, and I was home. You
So
know,
was it a lot more appealing to you than if the job had been in Wisconsin or Texas or anywhere else?
oh yeah, I wouldn't even have considered it.
I see. But
But it was,
because it was Kansas City, as you say, not just preordained, it seems to have been the perfect thing for your and your family's life for you to be able to continue to have your wonderful touring jazz career, but to be rooted in Kansas City while you did it.
yeah. I mean, I grew up. I mean, we used to drive past UMKC all the time.
Hmm.
And UMKC was like an ivory tower. It wasn't. It's not the most diverse. It wasn't. Black people didn't go to UMKC by and large.
Right.
They don't
And
have
there
their
was a time
history.
when
Their
Bob.
history is not a history of diversity.
Uh-huh. Well,
And so,
all I know about UMKC before you were there was, I guess it must have been the 40s or 50s, but I know that Bob Brookmeyer was there and the singer Chris Connor, and they were playing a whole bunch of Stan Kenton music. And Chris wanted the gig with Stan Kenton, and she knew that music, and she ended up getting that gig. But interesting to think about Bob Brookmeyer running the program, but it may have been pretty much an all-white band and that kind of music and a whole other slice of jazz.
yeah, I mean, there was John Ring, and then there was a trumpet player. Lord, their names are getting away from me.
Hmm.
But I was the first. George Salisbury used to teach there.
Hmm.
And I was the first full-time Black faculty
Okay.
member in the history of the school in the conservatory
No kidding. You mean on any instrument?
on any instrument in any position, whether it was
Wow.
dance or classical or vocal. I was the first Black period hired for the conservatory. And
Well, to me, that's America. Having to break ground where it should have been broken many years before.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of incentive to go back. And you mentioned earlier, Bob, the steady paycheck
Yes.
and having health care.
Mm.
I that's been a blessing having health care. And I just know that it's just everybody should have health care for God's sake,
I know, and every other civilized country in the world does pretty much.
But,
Yeah,
yeah, in
yeah.
South Africa. But the other thing is that, it was just I felt I'd reached the apex in New York. I could work every day, but I couldn't work. I had to juggle too much just to work in New York because if I worked this club, then I couldn't work that club next. But rhythm section players, they could work, like Victor would put his drums in the Vanguard and he'd leave them there for 3 weeks. Because every
Right,
week
because he'd be playing like three
yeah,
back-to-back weeks or something, right?
he'd be with somebody else, Kenny Barron this week, and then he'd be with Sly the next week, and then this one the next week.
Right,
And
right.
but horn players couldn't, if you were a front man like me, a soloist, you couldn't do that because
Well,
you're
because if you had a week at the Vanguard or the Blue Note, they probably said you can't do this within 6 months in New York.
oh yeah, they got pissed, but I would always
Yeah,
do Bradleys, and they tried to give me shit about playing Bradleys, and I said no, come on now.
yeah.
I mean, if I did the Blue Note or if I did Birdland,
Hmm.
then they would say, well, you can't go on the Vanguard next week,
Right.
and vice versa. So I was at a maximum blessing level at New York, and I traveled a lot. I left
Right.
town. I was on the road a lot. I was just traveling. My calendar was full, but it was like kind of I reached an apex. I reached a critical
W-
max.
Was there a feeling of like kind of being like the hamster in the
Yeah.
wheel in the habit trail? Like,
Yes.
in other words, you were making money, you were playing great music, you were busy, but maybe you got a little burnt out, even though things were that good.
Yeah, and then this came in my lap, and I thought about it long and hard.
Hmm.
Harry Strayer, God bless his soul,
Yeah.
his wife Galen worked at the conservatory for many years. She was a financial officer.
And
And
if I can, just real quick, Carrie Strayer, for those of you who are not in the Kansas City area, was a great baritone saxophonist and the former leader of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra, and a wonderful arranger, a funny guy. Unfortunately, left us a few years ago, but Carrie was a fixture in the Kansas City scene, correct?
yes, yes. I mean, Carrie was, was a dear friend of mine, and
Hmm.
so he called me and said, "Hey, man, I think you should check this out," because I gotten a letter from uh, the guy before. He's gonna kick my ass for not remembering his name, but he was leading, and I gotten a letter before a few years earlier if I was interested in coming
Hmm.
back, and but nah. But
So
then
what year did you actually come back to Kansas City?
the year 2000.
Well, that kind of makes it real easy and perfect in terms of your life. So you were there from 2000 to 2020, and it's like being in the army. You did your 20.
Yeah, I did 25 years in New York.
Yep.
So my life has been sort of like, like
In
this
in blocks,
in blocks.
and they seem like very productive and successful and manageable blocks. And just looking at the careers of many of the folks we know, I know you deserve this. I think you're a wonderful musician, but you're also very fortunate. Would you say?
Yes, and I earned it.
I hear you.
So
It's great. It's great to hear you say that too, because a lot of cats, that they play their asses off. Oh man, I can't play. Oh, I hate my solos. Whatever.
I'm
So
short for that, man.
yeah, well, you worked hard and you earned it. Is there anything else you'd like to say about UMKC, about the fact that I'd like people to know outside of this city how many great young players have come up even in the 20 years that I've been visiting here. What seems to happen is they're the older cats on the scene, whoever they are, not old, older. You, Bob Bowman, Danny Embry, Angela Hagenbach, whoever. But then all of a sudden you turn around and they're Lifer brothers, and there's Mark Lowry and there's Stephen Martin, and then they become 30 or 35, and Brett Jackson, and then there's some other cats. Every time I come here, there's some players I've never heard of in my life who sound great. I had that experience with Joel Stratton and then with Nate Nall, and so it seems to me that the largest percentage of the excellent young jazz players who are imbuing the scene in Kansas City and who have been feeding it for years came out of your program. No offense to any other program. Would there be some truth to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a
Um,
pride too. You know,
just off the top of
I'm very proud of the program, and I'm
yeah.
very proud of the students that came through it. And those 20 years there was life changing for me. I
Hmm.
grew as a person and as a musician and as a teacher. And I spent countless nights laying up thinking about how I could help this one or that one.
Hmm.
I tell the students, I think about you guys more than you think about yourself.
No
You
kidding.
know?
You'd be thinking, man, I got to help that trombone player with X or with
Oh,
Z.
yeah, how can I, what can I do? What am I going to talk about in improv? Or what am I going to, what am I going to
Hmm.
do to open up somebody's head? Or what can I
Right.
share? Something that has made it easier for me. And they have to get over the fact that music can be easy if
Hmm.
if you know what they're doing. Like it's like fingering an instrument. If you know how to finger it correctly, a lot of
Right.
things are easier.
Well, it's like riding a bicycle, right? If you know how to do it, you're probably not going to fall off.
No, I mean, when something comes easy to them, they feel like, well, I don't want to cheat. You can't cheat in music.
Well, I'm not sure I actually understand that. What do you mean by that?
I mean, if I show somebody a system, you know, how to play over changes, people expect things to be very difficult.
Hmm.
And you have to understand, Art Blakey told me somebody did it first, then they wrote it down.
Ah.
So the people that did it first, they had to find a way that was simple. And the simplest things are the hardest things. So simplicity is a very difficult thing to grasp and to understand, to get a lot of mileage out of a well rehearsed and well ingrained collection of 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 sounds. Because if you start, it's like a C scale. If you start from C to C, if you learn the major scale, you've learned 8, you've learned 12 other scales.
Okay.
If you start on D, if you start on C, you start on the second, you got a Dorian, but it's still a C major scale. But you say Dorian, it has the same key signature as E Phrygian, has the same key signature as
F Lydian and
so
on.
it's like if you see E Phrygian, why don't you can say, well, I don't have to learn a Phrygian because I already know major. See, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So you would say
people write books and give things a name, like the diminished whole tone scale, for instance. There's a lot of names for that damn scale.
But would you say that part of your objective, because you are a great composer and a great saxophonist, but I think also an eternal student of music. Is that correct?
You have to be.
Well, you know something? I think, is it possible that over the 20 years you were at UMKC, that you refined your way of simplifying things to make them as clear as possible for these students?
Yes. I was learning too. I told them, you guys are guinea pigs for me.
Were you better at it after 8 years than you were when you took the job?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was always changing. Though. Some of the teachers I admired the most, they were really, really good because they did the same thing every year. And so that encouraged cheating. Because you could say, oh, I took Mr. Jones's class last year. I have his final.
Yeah.
I'll give that to you. But I was always changing stuff. I used to get terrible reviews about class expectations because they didn't know what to expect. So my teacher evaluations from the students was always low on that one because they didn't. Because when they get to college, they're professionals. They know how to cram and they know how to do just what the syllabus says. Get an A. And that's what the syllabus is for in academia, is to cover your ass.
I see.
These students were professionals. If you get into college, you know how to be a student.
Yes.
And you know how to make the grade, but you really don't know how to learn.
Well, you know what, Bobby?
You'll cram for a test and you won't be able to retain it. So I try to keep them on their toes so they learn. They might not have learned as much.
Yes.
So I went for quality over quantity.
Well, it sounds to me like you developed, even if you never called it this, it seems like you developed a philosophy of teaching that was more like actual jazz improvisation rather than written music.
Oh yeah.
I mean, improvise the semester, improvise the band book, improvise what's going on at the rehearsal.
Yeah. And the thing about too, also when the big band, I wasn't worried about the band. My philosophy is I wasn't worried about the band getting through as much material in a year because I was building a book. So by the end of the year, I had, after we did a concert, I didn't say, okay, let's hand that music in and start over.
Yes.
I would keep that music in the book and then we would build on that book. So by the end of the year, we could do a 3-hour gig because we had music. I didn't have to pull out, we got a 3-hour gig. Now let's pull out some new music for that gig.
Well, what's interesting about that is if you think about it, any great big band that we know or that we were lucky enough to play with or see live, Count Basie, Woody Herman, Duke Ellington, Stan Kenton, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, Carla Bley, Charlie Persip Superband, the fact of the matter is those bands would never play 8 charts on a concert, hand them in, and then play 8 more. They all had a book.
The books were always like this.
Yeah, and sometimes it was like the blue book and the red book, or the black book.
They had music,
Right.
And they didn't turn stuff in. So I always treated my bands at UMKC as a band. I said, this is not CON 328. You're in my band.
Basically the Bobby Watson Big Band with whatever that entails.
You're in the Bobby Watson Big Band.
There you go.
What they call it in the course catalog. You have to sign up for a certain course, but you're actually in my band.
Beautiful. Well, Bobby, I think I just have 2 more questions for you because last week we were in high school and in Miami and with Art Blakey, and this week we kind of caught up to the future and the present. And so, Bobby, I'm going to ask you a frank question. You've been teaching at UMKC for 20 years, and it's a shame that this pandemic came down so that you all couldn't be in person with each other during your last semester. But how do you feel now that you're retired from this job?
Great.
Yeah, in what fashion?
I set my own agenda every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to, if I start something, I don't have to stop because I have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
My sleep pattern is 24. I'm on the Tarzan theory, as they say.
What does that mean?
Sleep when sleepy, eat when hungry.
Okay, me eat, me sleep, whatever.
Sleep when sleepy, eat when hungry. So
well,
I don't have to, I have a dinner time because my wife, we like to eat together. But she might go to bed at one time. I might go to bed at another time and get up at another time and then go back and take a nap in the afternoon and then get up. I'm back to where I used to be before I came to Kansas City. I've set my own agenda. I might start working on a big band chart around 11:30 at night. And when I was in school, I would have to cut off at 12:30 because I had to get up at 8.
Right.
So, but now I can go till 3 and 4 in the morning and take a nap and wake up at 9.
See, so this answers my last question for you tonight, Bobby, which was, now that you've retired from UMKC, and we've talked about many things, not all things in your career. I was going to ask you, what are you working on now? But you just told us to a degree.
Yeah, I'm writing music and trying to practice. I'm catching up on a lot of listening because I've collected a lot of music over the last 20 years. For teaching and also for me, I just growing my collection. And when I first, because I didn't teach this last year, they let me be the Global Jazz Ambassador. So I've been really basically semi-retired all year. So
I see.
So every day is like Saturday, really. And so I started listening to all this music I've collected.
Okay.
And so I've got 20 years of listening to catch up on.
And I'm assuming that, the labels don't mean much, but I'm assuming that listening is not all jazz.
No, it's all over the place. I got some Irish folk music, with the Irish flute.
Yeah.
I got some classical stuff. I got some tapes. I got some tracks of different editions of the big band that I hadn't heard. After we do the concert, I have special guests over the years. I've had Jack Walrath out here and Nicholas Payton and Kenny Drew Jr. and Robin Eubanks and, Slide Hampton and Jimmy. It's just so many cats I've had with the band. Ray Mantia, Curtis, and then we make everything is recorded and archived at the conservatory, and they give me a CD. Beautiful. And I put it away, and I really wouldn't go back and listen to it. So now it's all on my iPad or iTunes library. And so I put it on random, and all of a sudden something will come up, and there's a Nutcracker Suite we did, or we did, Peer Gynt, or, there's some Oliver Nelson. We did the Oliver Nelson concert, or, the Frank Foster concert, or the Jimmy Heath concert, or the Benny Golson concert,
And Bobby, is your memory kind of good enough that most of these things, even if you haven't heard them for 20 years, do you usually recognize the piece and the performers and the time period when it pops on your iTunes?
Kind of. What's funny, Rob, is that it catches me off guard. I'll go, who is that? That band, that sounds good. I'm thinking it might be like Duke or something. I had them. We were striving to really recreate the vibe. And so I'll listen. I'll go, wow, what band is that? Oh shit, that's us.
Right. Well, that reminds me, I remember reading Duke Ellington was incredibly prolific, right? Over 1,000 compositions. And the man lived to be, I think, 74. He was born in 1899, which is kind of incredible to me. But I read that Duke, in a blindfold test, they played him kind of an obscure composition of his, not something like Mood Indigo or Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me, or something that would be familiar to the masses. And they played this piece for Duke, and he goes, "That's really nice. What is that?" And they go, "You wrote it." You know? So that's deep when you've written enough music that you can objectively say, "Well, I enjoyed that, but what is it?" And it came out of your pen at some point, but you didn't remember. But Bobby, would you say that you remember most of the salient moments from your career, playing certain music, playing with certain people, certain countries? I mean, do you have kind of an archive in your head like the UMKC library?
Yeah, I tend to move on to the next one.
You mean looking forward creatively?
Yeah, I tend not to cling to memories too much. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff I have, like Jim Hartog, he can recall. He'll remind me of certain gigs we did, and you remember this, you remember that, and I'm going, oh man, now I remember. I just don't. There are certain many gigs with the sax quartet I remember, but there are
Mm-hmm.
many I don't, and many with Horizon, and many I don't, many with Art, and many I don't, and many stuff with the big band. That's why I said over 20 years, I was always just chugging forward, and a new class of students and new repertoires and different things, and
Mm-hmm.
then now I'm getting chance to just listen to it come back at me, and I've forgotten about a lot of
So Bobby, you may be, I mean, in spite of this horrible pandemic and disease and the lockdown, the timing of everything is this may be one of the greatest periods of your life because you're young and vital and thinking hard and writing your butt off. And now, after 20 years of having to commute to teach jazz and doing a great job in turning out generations of really great young musicians who really have more of an organic flavor for jazz than they might get at some colleges. Now you're in a position where you can do all the work that you ever wanted to because A, there ain't no gigs, and B, you retired last week.
it. Yeah, I mean, I've written 5 big band charts since the lockdown started.
I've only written 2, and I don't have a hundredth of your craft. So I'd like to hear the 5 that you wrote. And just really quickly, I'm just going to tell the listeners about the very rare times that you and I got to record together. And the first time, it was the first record I ever made. It was on Blue Note. I was pretty excited. And it was with Teramasa Hino, the Japanese trumpet player, cornetist. And the main band was a quintet or a sextet, me and Hino, and some tracks with John Schofield. And then the rhythm section was Onaje Allen Gums, rest in peace, last month, on piano, and either Bob Hurst or Mike Formanek on bass. And then your partner in the great quintet that you've had for years, Horizon, Victor Lewis. And I was so thrilled because I grew up listening to Woody Shaw, and I said, damn, I'm playing with 2/5 of Woody's quintet, Onaje and Victor. And I was really thrilled by this. And then one of Hino's pieces, it was called Time Outing. They brought you in and you played on just that piece. And I believe you and I and Schofield and Teramasa all soloed on that same piece. That was my first opportunity to play with you. And we've been friends all these years, but we haven't crossed paths on the stage that much.
Yeah.
And probably the next time we really got to record was 2 months ago here in Kansas City, and I asked you if we could record your octet version of Conservation, which is one of my favorite pieces of yours. And thank God that we all played the hell out of it because it's not an easy piece of music. But like I told you, take 2. Take 1 was pretty good, but when you hear take 2, you're gonna say, that's it. And we also had Bobby as a guest on Cedar Walton's Black, which was originally on Joe Henderson Mode for Joe. And then Cedar was in Art's band, and there are all these circles and things tying together. But Bobby, I love your saxophone playing, and I love your writing and your arranging. I'm sure a lot of other people do too. And I think this is a good place to call it. What do you think?
I agree, and
Yeah.
you're a hell of a player, man. And I've watched you just grow and mature, and just what's the word? Season.
Season.
More
Okay.
seasoned you get. I'm not getting older. I'm getting seasoned.
Seasoned.
Certain people get old. Other people just season.
Right.
And you're
Well,
one of
I appreciate that. I mean, like, I think Sonny Rollins is 87 right now, and I think he's still just seasoning.
yeah, he's seasoning.
He's seasoning. Well,
Yeah.
Bobby, it's great
Thank
to
you,
have
Rob.
you, and you're welcome. And I'd like to point out, I'm going to reach out to your colleague Jack Walrath. He's another person we'd like to have on this show.
Oh yeah.
And I want to tell the folks about a couple upcoming interviews. You can look up the day of the week. Nobody knows the day of the week anymore. Blur's Day, as you said,
Yeah,
right?
Blur.
But on May 24th, whenever that is, my guest here on Live Jazz Kansas City will be the great drummer Bill Goodwin, 40 years with the Phil Woods Quintet, and played in the Bill Evans Trio and did every kind of thing. And then on May 31st, over Memorial Day weekend, we'll have the great baritone saxophonist Roger Rosenberg, who played from everybody from Miles Davis to Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop, and has been with Steely Dan for the last 15 years. So those cats are coming up. So please support Live Jazz KC. Our recording engineer and sound man tonight has been a wonderful young drummer here, Jim Lauer. And our producer and the head of this website is Herschel McWilliams, who's a fine tenor saxophonist himself. And what can I say? We're trying to bring you some great jazz and conversation during this lockdown, and we all look forward to playing live again. But Bobby, it's my thrill to interact with you and to discuss all these things virtually, and to learn about your life and your career. And thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Rob. We've been across the burning sands together.
Uh-huh. I'll ask you what that means next week.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so thank you to everybody.
That means we go a long way back.
We go a long way. Well, you know what? I mean, somebody was trying to tell me some stuff earlier tonight, and I had to say to them, listen, man, I've known Bobby Watson since 1 year before you were born. So or in the words of Phil Woods, I got pairs of shoes older than you.
Oh.
Right. Well, anyway, there is, I guess there is a Venmo on the screen if you'd like to contribute, if you enjoyed the interview tonight. But we're going to keep on bringing you great virtual music and interviews with Kansas City and New York musicians and beyond on Live Jazz KC. Thanks, guys, for giving me the opportunity. And thank you, my dear friend Bobby Watson, for joining me tonight.
My pleasure.
All right, Bobby.
Thank
you too.
Thank you.
Okay, good night. Oh, and we're going to leave it, Jim, if you'd be so kind, maybe you could play Bobby's composition, Dark Days, as we sign off here.
Mm-hmm.